anything that wasn't straight basically was bad hair, okay? What it is, what it ain't, it's your girl Umbrella, and I am back with another video, okay? In today's video, we are continuing the series called Hair Routines During Slavery. This is part 2, okay? This is part 2. Ain't that what Usher said? This is part 2. We are getting into the 1800s to the 1900s. So if you guys are ready, make sure you like, comment down below, and subscribe to this channel. You already know the next milestone is 2K. We are getting underway. I'm so excited about this channel. I'm excited about this series. So let's keep it going, okay? Leaving off from the last video, I believe we were talking about how Black people's hair was advertised in the early media of the 1700s, or the end of the 1700s. So now we're going to the 1800s. So the most significant thing that happened in the 1800s was the ending of slavery. Slavery ended officially in America in 1865, okay? Not before and not after. 1863 Emancipation Proclamation. Then that law was not enforced to end slavery in all the states of America. It's only enforced in the North. So the South was still, they still had slaves. So hence why a lot of freed slaves went to the North to live instead in escaping the South, right? So there was still a lot of plantations that owned slaves in the South. So the official end of slavery was June of 1865. That's when troops came to southern states to free the slaves that were still left. So yes, that's why we recognize Juneteenth as the official end of slavery. That's why we celebrate June 19th every year. Black people, that's what we do, okay? That's why we do not celebrate July 4th, because July 4th is just the independence of America from Britain, okay? So yes, before we get into the hair, we had to get into some history, okay? So now that we know that, we can get back into the hair. So during the 1800s, Black women, of course, they wanted a more conservative, tapered look to kind of match the new sophistication of their level of freedom. Okay, so they just rocked hair into braids, going like one across the sides, one across the other side, and then they would tie it in the back. Okay, sometimes they would even thread their hair with some type of yarn, or some type of thread to keep it together, making it cute and tapered, okay? How men, they wore their hair in low haircuts. Y'all remember in the first video, we talked about how men, African culture, it was considered that if your hair was bald, that you were mourning, or it's like a refresh or restart. So we're getting back to that ideology with the low haircuts. So a lot of men had low haircuts. They didn't have hair anymore like they did when they were in slavery, and they rocked a side part, okay? Something that I found that was so interesting is a Jim Crow, okay? So a Jim Crow was a comb or a paddle brush that was mainly used to detangle wool and fibers. But Black people were so smart, we was like, let's use it for our hair, okay? So that was what a Jim Crow was a paddle brush used to detangle wool fibers that was adopted by Black people to do and detangle our curly hair, okay? So I think that's genius and so smart. And it kind of course, as soon as you think of Jim Crow, you think of the laws that kept us segregated in the 50s. And that's where they got the name from, is from this paddle brush that we used on our hair. Isn't that crazy? I always wanted to know what Jim Crow meant, and now we know that it's hair related. That's insane. And it's more insane that they knew that we used it for our hair. You know, they were paying attention a little too much, if you ask me, you know, a little obsessed, you know what I'm saying? So let's keep going. So African Americans in the mid 1850s started to acquire businesses and even became wealthy. Okay, so when you have wealth, that comes more opportunity and access to things that you wouldn't have otherwise. So, meaning a lot of black men and black women had access to hair products that they didn't have before. Remember, in the last video, we talked about how black people were using lard and bacon grease and all these different things for their hair, because they just had to use whatever was in the kitchen. They was using butter and such which and such forth. Okay, but now that most of them and some of them, in almost every town there was a black town. You know what I mean? So we're talking about people that have working as blacksmiths and all types of things that they were doing, back during this time. They were creating things. They were artists. They were carvers. They were just so many things that black people started to do, and they became resourceful and they became wealthy. So with that being said, they had access to like higher levels of ingredients, opportunities, all that. Then the hot comb came. Okay, the hot comb was made in Europe. There is certain people that say it was made in America. I feel like there's like maybe two different versions of it, and that's why they're saying that, which makes sense. But basically, it came from Europe. A model of it came from Europe, and everybody in America wanted it. Of course, once it hit America, it goes straight to the white people. So white people have first dibs, but we are the ones that really really wanted the access to that. Okay, so as the hot comb became extremely popular, especially with black people in America, here comes the press, right? So here comes the conversation about good hair versus bad hair. And basically anything that was bad hair was my hair, curly, um a statement, you know what I'm saying? Like anything that wasn't straight basically was bad hair, okay? So that became the press. Like all you seen in the newspapers, if they talked about black people that weren't, because they couldn't call us runaways and stuff no more because we was free, okay? That part they couldn't do. They couldn't shade us in that way no more. So now they wanted to say, okay, here's good hair, here's bad hair. And we enter the early 1900s, and we're talking about Garrett Augustus Morgan, and he created the first hair relaxer. He first made the hair relaxer by accident. So it wasn't supposed to be a hair relaxer for black people or anything like that. He was trying to make a product that would protect his fabrics from scorching in a sewing shop. Okay, so he tested the liquid that he made on a dog, on a curly hair dog, and he saw that it straightened the hair. So once he saw that, he was like, I guess he thought of like, hey, well, if it can straighten this curly haired dog, then it could straighten a black person's hair for sure. So he decided to jar it up and make it as the first hair relaxer. Women were kind of like a second thought when it came to the hair relaxer. It was first advertised for men because men became popular in music. I told you that after the 1850s, we became wealthy. So a lot of us, a lot of black people were famous musicians, singers. Like we're talking about like the early ages of like Duke Ellington and Josephine Baker. We're talking about those like famous like performers. Okay, so it was mainly advertised to those people, right? So it was mainly advertised to musicians and people, black men basically. So they would talk about your hair being bad, put a relaxer in, you know what I'm saying? I could put some pictures of advertisements right here so you guys can see. The hairstyle that became popular was called the conch hairstyle, and the conch hairstyle was a combination of potatoes, eggs, and red devil lye. And the red devil lye was none other than a drain cleaner. Okay, yes, they were putting drain cleaner, eggs, and potatoes in their hair. Mixture was able to make like the first slip back. The first slick back, okay? Malcolm X famously said, because he used to relax his hair and then he used to like get his hair like treated with a hot comb sometimes. He famously said that the comb felt like it was raking through his skin. That's how hot it was. Okay, so that's no BS. Okay, so the conch hairstyle was made different ways. You could go to a hair salon and get them to put in an actual relaxer, or like the mixture was made if that's all you had in your house, because clearly those are household things: potatoes, eggs, and the drain cleaner, right? So that's basically a mixture that was made from people that couldn't afford a relaxer, right? So all of that was applied to the hair, right? Slicked back, and I guess it created some type of mold. And most of the hairstyles of the 1900s was like laid back, straightened hairstyles with Vaseline. Okay, we're talking about the early stages of a pomade. Okay, Josephine Baker actually popularized a gelled down look. As you know, we kind of call it finger waves now because it's like wavy, and like she did the baby hairs in the front, like popping, okay, popping. All right, so she really put like baby hairs on the map, okay, back then. But yes, she had her finger waves. That's what we call it now. But she popularized a gel down look, and she actually had her own gel that she sold, and I didn't even know that. And it was called the Baker Fix, which is super dope and super cool. Of course, the working class women, like, because we were transitioning from slavery, we weren't out the woods yet, even though they couldn't have us be slaves. But a lot of people after being free didn't know where else to go, or how to make money, right? If they weren't wealthy, if they didn't have a talent and acquire that and become wealthy from it, then they had to work. And most people became housemaids for white people. So it's like a different form of slavery, basically. It's like I can't the only difference in my opinion is that like black people wasn't living in the house. Sometimes they were. Women of the house would allow them to stay there, but that's only because they, wanted to work them to death or whatever, or they were nannies to their children, or they were nursing their children. But the only difference, in my opinion, is that most black women, they got to go home. Like, I'm reading a book right now about Winston E. Willis, and he talked about his grandparents, and they worked as maids to this white family, and they only went home on the weekends. Like, they lived with them every day of the week minus the weekends, and we're talking about in the 50s. This is 1950 now. They were old, and they were maids, and like I guess the father worked, of course, in the kitchen or something like that, or as the driver. And they literally lived with them every day, and they only went home on the weekend. So they had a house and everything, but they only went home on the weekend, which I thought was like insane. And it's sad because it's like, it's like I have a house, but I can't barely live in it. That's annoying to me. But anyways, working class women that couldn't afford the latest tools and ingredients. Of course, mentioned before that they used whatever they had in their house. Okay, most women that couldn't afford the hair relaxer or the hot comb, they just used a fork and heated it up on the stove and use it to comb out their hair or straighten their hair, which is crazy. And I know that hurt. Look at my hair, y'all. I'm not putting no fork in that, but I might have if I came from that time period. Without relaxers, they use lard or lye to put in their hair to straighten it. And then something super creative was that they would cut up tobacco tins and make them into strips, and then they would roll the strips into brown paper bags, and then they would roll their hair up. Like, super, super cute. And it instantly, I thought of like how we do now for editorial, like videos and stuff. We like use soda cans sometimes in our hair. Like, that's immediately what I thought about, to like use it as hair rollers. So, I mean, girl, we are the truth. Like, if you don't know, now you know. We are the truth. This is insane how we're able to make nothing into something, okay? We need to do the 1950s to the 2000s. That's what we need to do in the next video. So I will see you guys in the next video. It's your girl Ombre Alert. Bye.